Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Kitchen talk. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk. Let's talk. Conversations that cool. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about?
Hey. All right. It is Kitchen Talk, CTC, Conversations That Cook. We are back in our new season. So happy to be here and sharing this time with you all. Hopefully, it is sparking conversations and you guys are enjoying some kitchen talk of your own. I don't know what it is about the kitchen that just make people blah 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 blah, but I love it. So welcome to our returning. I'm just gonna like dub you the returning host, co-host. Just come whenever we ask, and I appreciate you so much.
Absolutely.
Darrick D,
Absolutely.
McGhee Senior. So excited to have you back.
Yes, ma'am.
Happy new season with us. So glad you could join us tonight. Listen, we got to dig in to this voting and over the summer while we were on hiatus, so much was going on. I was like, oh my God, we need to be on Kitchen Talk right now. Talk about some of this stuff. So I'm gonna make you go back just a little bit. We're gonna dig right in. So the first thing I want us to kind of go back to is the debate that sparked this whole kind of new movement. Now, I did not watch the debate. I don't even think I knew that it was coming on, right? For one, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna be so transparent and honest right now. Y'all know I really don't do politics. I mean, we've been doing this show for a little while, and I know that it is necessary, but it's not something that I go seek after and look for and all of that. So the only time I ever really watched a State of the Union was during former President Barack Obama's administration.
Okay.
I watched the State of the Union. Necessarily before that. Okay, so that's that. I think I've watched one or two times with no, I can't even say that. I was about to say Clinton, but if it's breaking news, I watch, if the president got something to say or whatever. But other than that, nah. I'm not, I'm not.
I respect that.
So so when it gets into now the debate that I did watch was the vice president debate with Harris and
Cheney. I'm not Cheney, but
Pence.
Yeah, Pence.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that was the one with the fly on his head.
Yes. Yes, that one I did watch, and I enjoyed it so much because she was, well, we know how she was. She was amazing. So that one I did watch. So I'm not really a debate watcher. I'm not really into all of this. Most of the time, by the time they get into all of that, I probably already know who I'm going to vote for. And sometimes I guess just call me one of the typical Black people, just Democrat down, down the ballot or whatever. However, I do plan on watching the one that's coming up Tuesday, but we'll get to that. But I did not watch the debate between uh, Trump and Biden. I just know, like, the next morning, I'm flipping through, I'm watching. I think I had turned to CNN for something. Sometimes I watch CNN to try to catch myself up. And it was like, oh my God, Biden was so terrible. And da 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 da. And then it was, he need not run. I'm like, what happened? So what happened?
So let me start at the outset by saying 4 years ago, we knew that President Biden was going to be the eldest president. Even running for re-election, he was going to be the oldest president. We knew that. So no one should be surprised, and no one should have been surprised by that. And you look at anybody who's won presidency. You can look at Barack Obama, for example. From the time he took office in 2008 to the time he left office, you saw how he aged. I mean, that is a job that's going to wear on you, right? And so you add that to someone who's already in their mid 70s when they enter into the presidency. 4 years later, right, you're going to be over 80. Everyone knew that. And so but if you've been a follower of Joe Biden's career, I mean, one thing he's been complimented on is his ability to debate, right? His ability to be able to communicate the message and be able to release information almost from the top of the dome. The debate was just the opposite of that, right? There was already questions coming out of the Democratic side, at least, about whether or not he was physically capable and able to endure a re-election, right? Just what it's going to take. No one was surprised that it was going to be a Biden and Trump rematch. Everybody expected that. No matter who was running on the Republican side, everybody knew that it was going to end up being Trump, right? Because there were Republicans who believed that Trump was robbed of his second term, that the election was stolen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so going to that debate, there were a lot of questions going into it from the rules that were put in place, and how are you going to be able to maintain decorum and civility and things of that nature. And again, up to this point, you were seeing the frailty of Joe Biden. He was seemingly just showing a slower step, slower statements, slower talk, all that type of stuff. The night of the debate, right, it started out typical. I mean, Trump came out and was Donald Trump. And then there was at least one question that was asked. And really what really became alarming for everybody was when Biden had a major stuttering incident in the midst of answering a question. And like, he literally could not gather his thought. And that's where all of a sudden social media world went crazy, because he could not gather his thought. And he looked lost. It looked like someone who really should not be the most powerful person in our government. And it kind of, some say it went downhill from there. I would argue, as a person who looks at political science, I would argue that he actually recovered as the debate went on. The problem with his recovery was the mishaps at the beginning of the debate were so deplorable and so alarming and so concerning that even though he recovered, quote unquote, it wasn't a recovery that made you forget about what you had just witnessed. And you start thinking about all that's going to be possibly presented in a second term, it became even more alarming. And so, I think Republicans found it laughable and began to hit social media in that regard. Democrats, especially high-level Democrats, became very concerned. And as you mentioned, you saw on CNN the next day, it became almost instant while the debate was still going on. Questions were beginning to be asked from his own party on whether or not he was suitable to be to endure another campaign, let alone serve for 4 years. I would also argue, and I'll stop here, I'll also argue that some of that concern that was raised, I think some of it was literally about his physical health and mental health. I think also it was the realization that there are people within the Democratic Party that do not want Kamala Harris as the next president, right? And so now, if this guy can't fulfill another term, then automatically bodes well for her, right? And we can the show goes on. But I mean, it was instant. I watched bits and pieces. I haven't really been watching debate like I did years before, because I can't handle when there is no decorum, when there's yelling across each other. People really want to hear people's policy ideals and that regard versus the shouting matches and things of that nature. But I did see that part, and it was alarming. I don't care what your ideology is; it was alarming to see it, because you also realize that our neighboring countries and even our enemies are watching as well in some capacity, and it leaves you very vulnerable.
So I I was already kind of concerned about him running for another term because I thought he wasn't gonna do it. Given his age, given if you in here for 4 more years, that's 4 more years.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so that's a long time. But I also knew that people are concerned about um Vice President Harris becoming President Harris by
Yeah,
default in that way.
yeah,
That they absolutely don't want that.
correct.
Um, I still am not able to wrap my mind around Trump being a viable candidate for a presidency,
Hmm.
and he has been president.
Hmm.
Like it still boggles my mind. I have not found the logic to any of that. But hey, this
Yeah,
is America, right?
yeah, correct.
But this is where we live. There are some jobs that I cannot get without a PhD, but I could probably be president, huh?
That part's true. That part's true. That part's true.
So I'm still trying to, reconcile that. I just don't understand it. But hey, so we move into the fact that he did decide that he's gonna run, but now y'all scared because y'all don't want her to be president, after, or you don't think she or you don't believe at this point that he will beat Trump. So
Hmm.
it's two things going on.
Hmm.
You don't want him to give up the office and give her the office by default. But you also, at this point, because he has decided to run, you don't think anybody else would be able to beat Trump.
Hmm.
So here you are, like, and then so you make this decision, which in my opinion, like most of the things that I've heard, for him to give it up is selfless,
Yeah,
because people do not give up power
correct.
easily.
Correct.
Um, so I would give him that.
Hmm.
And for the betterment of the country, I would give him that. But then she becomes the candidate.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, wait a minute.
yeah,
Y'all didn't want her to be president by default.
yeah, yeah,
And now she's the candidate.
yeah.
So, and that's not to say that I'm happy to see it in my lifetime, but y'all ain't want Hillary.
Yeah.
So are we really doing this?
So I will tell you, it's strategic in whether it's intentional strategy or not, it's strategic. And here's what I'll say. Um, the groundswell of concern about Biden being able to beat Trump begin to grow a lot within the Democratic Party. Let me give an indictment on the National Democratic Party, because I try to be fair and balanced on both ends. If you research who are the ones really saying Biden needs to get out of the race, it really was the older, powerful white Democrats, right? It was them. If you really look at the ones that were starting to publicly talk more about their concern about Biden being a suitable candidate, it was them. It wasn't. You didn't find any black congressional members, male or female, that were on a record, right? They may have said something like, he's our nominee, or I'm all the way in with him. but you started having the Nancy Pelosi's, you started having other white, senators, Democratic senators, and congressional members starting to go on record with their major concerns. And they wanted him to get out. Now, I would argue, here's my further indictment. I would argue, as they were pressing because they knew convention was coming. And with the convention coming, they wanted to go into the convention with no nominee already identified. So they can then have basically the convention then would produce who the person was. Biden held on and kept saying, I'm not getting out of the race, not getting out of the race. And eventually he made the decision. But when he made the decision to get out of the race, in that same public announcement, he also endorsed her. So as a result, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, instantly endorsed her, right? Because he was one of the people that they probably would have wanted to throw his name in. He instantly endorsed her, right? You had a few others instantly endorse her. So all of a sudden, the same ones who wanted Biden out of the race were now finding themselves in a situation where whatever they were strategically trying to do was not going to come to pass, because Biden didn't just bow out. He bowed out and then endorsed the VP as his successor, as the next candidate. And all of a sudden you start seeing very well respected Democratic governors and senators, and all of a sudden getting behind her. And then what you saw is the same Black Democratic male and female congressional and U.S. senators who were locked in with him instantly shifted to her. Then you started seeing the Divine Nines getting behind her. Then you start seeing women groups getting behind her. You start seeing, white men, white women for her getting behind her. And all of a sudden, you left the Pelosi's of the world and others with no choice but to get behind her, because the base was starting to get behind her. And so, is it happening? It is happening, right? It is happening. Now, I would give this too. You did also see a major motivation and some enthusiasm get ignited, because there was a dying off of the base and the electorate in the hopes that they could maintain the seat in this upcoming presidential election. And then she gets in, all of a sudden you have an awakening. All of a sudden you're starting to see money being contributed, things of that nature. So there is an excitement. Now, what I think is important too, we got to look at is, while there are people who are very excited about a VP Kamala Harris running for president on a Democratic ticket, I think she's also benefiting from, there are people who just hate President Donald Trump and the thought of him being president again. So that's also boding well for her, raising money in that regard. So also remember that 4 years ago that she was at one point the front runner on the Democratic ticket, right? She was the one, she ran for president 4 years ago. For a period of time, she was polling higher than even Joe Biden was. She didn't hold on to it long, but she was, right? And so she's been through a campaign before. She understands how to campaign and how to deliver a message and things of that nature. The difference now is that she is now the one with the spotlight on her. So everything about her, going back to being attorney general in California, her years as U.S. senator, et cetera, all of that's now being put on the surface. The question that's going to be asked, Lisa, answered in November is not only just is America going to vote a woman to be the first president ever in our country? It's going to be a question of, how are Black men going to vote? Because if you look at the polling, Black men were polling at a high percentage in support of Donald Trump over Biden, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see, because there are still men who hold out the old school mindset that a woman, especially a Black woman's role, is to be in the kitchen and in the bedroom. There are some of them who still have that mindset. And so soon as that she became the nominee, you had some Black celebrities and Black social media influencers instantly come out and say, I will never support her, right? It's that old school mindset that came forth. And so that's going to have to be, it's going to be dealt with. I think Hillary Clinton, I think a lot of things went against Hillary Clinton, right? I think there were people who felt like they voted for the lesser of two evils between her and Donald Trump. People didn't trust Hillary Clinton, so they wouldn't get behind her. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But Biden endorsing Harris made it very hard for some of the other Democratic national leaders in their plan to try to do something different at convention. And I think that she has ignited some younger voters and things of that nature. Now, granted, November, albeit close, is still far away as well. So a lot of things can
Mhm.
happen where you can say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, all of a sudden, all that momentum can die off. But I mean,
Yeah.
she raised record levels of funding. I think she did. I think her, I don't. I've never really felt like VP. Your VP helps you win. They could probably hurt you. I've never really felt like a VP actually helps the presidential nominee win. I don't think that she lost any ground by whom she selected to be her VP candidate. Because you definitely don't want nobody who's going to outshine you. So I think she did a good job in that regard. But at the end of the
Mhm.
day, she's going to have to win on her platform and convince the majority that she can handle being president of the United States and
Mhm.
um, that she's worth the votes. Now,
Mhm.
and last thing I'll say in the Black community, what I hear a lot of, especially amongst like women, even young voters, is you're starting to see a glimpse of 2008 when Barack Obama became the nominee. You're starting to see some of that excitement among
Mhm.
certain segments of the Black community, in that belief. And these are people who are not getting caught up in whether she's Black or not Black. There, you're starting to see
Mhm.
that glimpse of that. But I'll just tell you again, Lisa, if you look at the poll before Biden got out, look at the polling now, you break down those percentages of support based on groups. Black men were supporting Trump at a higher percentage than they were supporting Biden. And I think they're still supporting Trump at a percentage that's higher than they're supporting Harris. And so that could become a deciding factor. Just like the Black women who've been behind Biden, right? They could become the deciding factor in the day as well.
So it's interesting that you're talking about the Black men,
Yeah.
because there has been again just a lot of just what you hear
Hmm.
watching different news outlets, and it's like they had like this call to arms or whatever to, that they were going to gather and make sure they protect her and this and that and the other. So I'm thinking that they're supporting her, but now that I'm hearing you talking about the polls, like how much can we believe as far as like polling? I always hear about polls. I don't never get asked to do no
Yeah, I
poll.
don't either.
I'm like, well, who y'all talking to?
Yeah. Yeah.
That sort of thing. So I do think that there has been great momentum
Yeah.
um and excitement. So I did for the first time. Well, yeah, I think this is the first time I ever watched the whole uh convention. Like I've
Wow. Okay.
never watched a convention. I think I might have watched former President Obama when he accepted the nomination, but I did not watch it the year before when he was did some type of speech or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, that we kind of got introduced to him or whatever. So I didn't watch it, but I watched all the nights this time
Yeah.
just to see, and it was just I don't know if they do this all the time. Is this how it go? But it made me want to go to one. Like I want to go to the convention now. They was partying, like they
Yeah.
was doing Prince music and
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is what we do at the convention at the you know, in politics and whatever. So they just had this whole big. It just seemed like a big party
Yeah. Yeah.
with little speeches in between.
Man, and that's the again the I would submit you would not have seen the convention the way you saw it if Biden was still the nominee,
Mm,
right? And I will also tell you if you've watched a convention or attended a convention, um, you've seen a convention, right? Each convention is different, so you can't compare it to 4 years before. Whether it's music, whether it's select, he's always gonna have speeches. Don't get me wrong, but as far as just like excitement in the room and if you go back 4 years ago, right? I mean, Biden's convention, albeit, or even Trump's, right? You're gonna always have a swollen room of people and the delegates, things of that nature. You're gonna see that, but as far as excitement and partying and balloons, right? It's that's not a consistent picture you're going to see, right? Also, you got to think about it too. Where you have the convention matters. So it was in Chicago, right? Um, you also trying to ignite excitement amongst sleeping voting blocks. I mean,
Mm,
there were groups of people who I believe had kind of just thrown in the towel and said, "Hey, man, listen, I'm done. Biden cannot win re-election. I'm done with this." And now these people are being re-engaged back into the process altogether. But also, it was designed for your very reaction, right? Is to get the Lisas and others to not only to tune in, to be fully engaged, to hear the speeches, to get excited, right? To get you motivated to want to be engaged. That's what conventions also are designed to do. I mean, the main point is, of course, is to have enough delegates put in to be able to officially nominate the said person on Thursday night. That person accepts the nomination. That's the
mhm.
ultimate assignment of the delegation. But also, you want to come out of there where people are excited for the chances, and then monies are raised to go along with that, right? So that's why you bring in, as the nights go on, they closer to Thursday, you bring in the power brokers, right? Like you bring in the Michelle Obamas because you know that she's going to always give that power speech, well as Barack Obama. Like
Absolutely.
you strategically position them on a certain day in a certain
Mhm.
time block. Like you never would have put a Michelle Obama or President Barack Obama at the delegation at the top of the hour, right? You get them when you know that the majority of the viewers are watching. Then
Mm.
you put them out there. Now, granted, they get like 10 or more than 15 minutes to speak. Like it's not a long time to speak.
Yeah, no, it
So you're
wasn't.
really trying to, in your time frame, really hit it and really get people really, really excited about what's going on. And the last thing the convention is designed to do is to bring in everyone, whether it was a former opponent of yours on the ticket or whatever. You're trying to get everybody in your party during that convention to have a united front, right? So whether it's previous presidents and previous congressional members and current, you're trying to get everybody to come in. So you're presenting to your voting block that we're all on the same
Mhm.
page, we're united. That's the message. And that wasn't, I would argue, a month prior to convention, that wasn't the reality. And whether it's real or not, when you saw it, everybody knew a month prior that there was a lot of dissension happening within the Democratic Party. And so what you saw in Chicago was them trying to convince the voters that, hey, listen, this is really we really are in it to win it,
Yeah.
right? We really are in it to win it.
I enjoyed the parts. I enjoyed it. Of course, I do have like my main show that I had to watch, so I pressed record and watched that, and then I came back and
We all do. We all do.
I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is." It was just, I was like, "Okay, so this is what they do." I'm learning a lot.
Mhm.
Now there was one or two people that wasn't too, they didn't feel like, was this the normal process? Like I know this was kind of abnormal for him to drop out at
Yeah.
this point, and then you don't get to I guess have the whole running thing again.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but is it constitutional the way they did it? It was like he just named her and
Mhm.
she was the candidate. But
Well,
But is that what really happened? Like I missed the whole transfer of power, so to speak.
yeah. So I guess a great question I think is worth clarifying. So Biden does not have the single authority to make her the Democratic nominee. What
Okay.
Biden did in his speech when he made it known that he was not going to seek reelection, that he was going to end his reelection campaign, he then said, "I endorse Vice President Kamala Harris to be my successor or to succeed me running for president." I can't remember the exact wording he used. Right, that did not prohibit someone else in the Democratic Party from throwing their name into the race. What it
Okay.
did, though, by the sitting president doing that, is it made it very clear if someone else is considering doing this, you're going to be doing this as really as the minority candidate for the Democratic nomination, right? And so then when I mentioned earlier about Governor Newsom then coming behind and endorsing her, and a few other governors, those endorsements, I would argue, probably had equal, if not greater, power than Biden's, because some of the people who endorsed her instantly after Biden were names of people that others wanted them to consider. If they had gone into convention without a clear person, it would have been an open convention, right? So at that point, you can throw names into the hat, right? And then all of a sudden, the state delegates now have to decide who they're going to go behind. And so as a result, because the president endorsed her as his successor to run, and Newsom then got out and endorsed her and a few other people, it basically cleared the path for her to be the only person. Right. But I think it's important for you to understand that Biden does not have the single authority to say she will be this person. And I think that's important. And so when I mentioned earlier about some of your national Democrats who want him to get out of the race, they want him to get out of the race and not endorse anyone as his successor, because that then would allow them to create an open convention and throw names out for consideration. By him endorsing her right out the gate, it's hard now to convince elected Democrats as well as state delegates to go against the sitting president's wishes. And I will say this, that if it had gone to convention as an open ticket and she would not have become the nominee, you may have begun to see the beginning of the end of the Democratic Party. And I say that to say, well, that's an exaggeration. The reality of it all is you would then have to answer, how do you not make the sitting vice president the front runner unless you are saying no to her because of her race or because of her gender? That would have become the conversation.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I said earlier, like you didn't see none of your black federal national elected officials ever argue for Biden to get out of the race. They still locked in with Biden. They said, listen, he's our president, he's our person until he makes a decision. We're behind him. And as soon as he made a decision, they all shifted to where he shifted to. And other ones had to come along in that regard. But I think it's important, just based on the sense of the Constitution, he does not have the authority to handpick that person. And I think that's critically important for people to understand. And there are people within her own party who are still having to come around to the realization that she is the nominee. And, you don't know what's going to happen. It's like, I think it's going to be some Republicans who will vote for her. There's going to be some Democrats who are going to vote for him. Right. And so it's going to be very interesting to see. That's why I said earlier about, while November is not that far away, it's kind of far away when you counting it based on political days, because all it takes is one bad situation. Like, so this debate they're going to have coming up, right? This is going to really be her first chance to really be in front of the American people as the Democratic nominee. And now I would put more pressure on her than I would put on Trump. Everybody knows what Trump's going to do at the debate. They kind of expect him to be Trump. With her, they're going to be listening to how she responds to foreign policy and how she answers questions on abortion and things of that nature, because now it's no longer VP. Now you are potentially going to be the next president of the United States. You got to convince the people that they can believe in you in that regard. That's going to be a big one. It's going to be a big one. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure placed on her. How she handles the moment is going to matter, right? Will she come across as an angry Black woman, or will she come across very educated and very polished on her responses to things? Will she take the bait when President Trump pokes her? Like, how do you respond to all that? She'll be picked apart on everything. And so this would be her chance, right? And if she handles the moment well, people may instantly buy into her. What you can expect is, after that debate, within 24 hours, there will be a new national poll that will release that will kind of show you if that debate helped or hurt her as relates to the undecided voters.
Yeah, I think that definitely she is going to be scrutinized and judged as she already is.
Correct.
But even more so, and
Correct.
that angry Black woman is really hard to get away from.
Very true.
Like, we don't have to do much.
Very true.
For
Very
that
true.
label, like,
yeah. And Lisa, I think it's important too. It's not even just like her answers. She'll be criticized for body language, facial expressions,
Yes.
All of those things will
Yes.
be, and this will, listen, you'll go in where CNN will over celebrate her, Fox News will overly criticize her. I'm talking more about just the undecided voters. They're going to be listening in, hopefully, to hear answers to questions that give them the impression that, okay, yes, she can handle the moment. And they'll be criticizing everything about her. I mean, for example, people like you saw Michelle Obama at the convention. I mean, she came out there with her braids in a ponytail, right? Now, mind you, when she was first lady, every time she made a change, people talked about it. They would do whole shows on her
Her
outfit, her
arms out,
hairstyle,
her this out, her that.
everything, right? And
Yeah.
so, it literally is that. And I've always said this, and I'm going to say it on your show, that the most criticized person in our world is the Black woman,
Absolutely.
right? Because if you look a certain way, you're angry. If you respond a certain way, you would know it all, right? If you wear certain things, it's unprofessional, right? It's so many things that you're fighting the
Yes.
invisible fight and the
Yes.
visible fight. And so
Yes.
you start out already
Yes.
understanding that I'm fighting
Yes.
against the
Yes.
norm and the narrative.
I mean, and then when it's not that, we are invisible.
Yeah, 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 correct.
So it's so crazy. So let me I gotta do it because I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
And in my conspiracy theory world, I believe that there are one or two, three, maybe four people that actually run the world. Like,
Okay.
that's just what I believe.
Okay.
So yes, we have all these brands of cars, but I believe all the brands of cars belong to one, two people.
Okay.
We have,
Yeah.
that, and I believe that the powers that be sometimes allow some things to go on. So as much as I was overjoyed to elect President Barack Obama, I still believe that it was allowed.
Okay.
Um, and that's just, in how my mind works, because it could be a little creative and chaotic, and well, it's just me. So this is what I want to say and share your thought. Do you think that this might be a part of a plan to get Trump back in office? Because, yes, while all of this excitement is going on, money is being raised, we do not go into the ballot booth with nobody.
Correct.
And we do not know what they write down. You would not have been able to convince me that people would not elect Hillary with experience and knowledge and intelligence over Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get that,
Mm-hmm.
but it happened, right?
Correct. Correct.
So, are the powers that be pulling strings and puppets and endorsing her and hyping her? And because I also had someone say to me, one of the professors on campus, you can never underestimate the power of racism and prejudice.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So I don't subscribe to the conspiracy theory. I believe this. I believe that just as people were shocked when Biden announced he was not going to continue running for re-election,
Mm-hmm.
I think Republicans were also shocked that he endorsed her.
Mm.
Right. And if you look at President Trump's campaign up to that point, and then the days that immediately followed, I think what you will see is a campaign that was ill prepared for that realization.
Mm.
But they had to then start not only altering their campaign, but also start having Trump start changing his message, right? Because they had basically spent the last 3.5 years preparing for this rematch.
Mm-hmm.
They never foresaw it not being him.
Mm-hmm.
And that realization. Now, but I can also argue that in 2008, I would say that Barack Obama was not who the Democrats wanted to be their nominee. They wanted to be a Hillary Clinton. And it was even talked about, whether it was factual or not, it was talked about that they wanted him to wait his turn. Right. And, it's been talked about, right? They wanted him to wait his
I've heard
turn.
that.
And the fact of the matter was, he basically said, my turn is now. And he ran and he ignited, a people and a base, and he rode that wave to victory. And so you've had blacks running for presidents before and never got to the point of being taken very seriously as their party's nominee. Right. And so just like I think Barack Obama in 2008 may have shocked the world by becoming the nominee over more established individuals, I think her becoming the nominee shocked a lot of people, probably even her own party. So they've had them doing about face. For me, there are Republicans whom I also know who believe that Trump was robbed of a second term. Trump should be ending his second term in November. And so they are very committed to making sure he gets his second term, which will be a brand new presidency, of course. There are people who really bought into that. My concern, Lisa, is not, whether Trump wins or loses. My concern is if Trump loses, what will be the backlash that we will see? Because, right, we just saw in our community, if you read in the paper recently, where there is I won't say resurrected, but a white supremacist group that's been meeting, and they marched to Cascades into the Capitol over the weekend with their faces covered and with their Confederate flags and things of that nature. And there are beliefs that in some of our rural counties, I've been hearing these stories. I don't know if they're true or not, so I want to be careful about saying that. But there are groups that are meeting in the woods, and they are strategizing for what they deem to be a civil war if Trump does not win. Right? I'm concerned more about that because it wasn't like one or two people believe that the election was stolen from him. There were hundreds of thousands of people, right? And so these are people who would go to their grave holding fast to that. With a bullet to their head, a gun to their head, they would say, yes, I believe the election was stolen from him. Those individuals are going to come to the polls motivated. And so but I would still argue, even with that momentum, even with that number of people, I still believe this race is going to come down to a small segment of people. I think Kamala Harris's greatest challenge, in my opinion, is black men. I think Trump's greatest challenge, in my opinion, is going to be black women, and it's going to be the younger voters as it relates to one or two topics, right? One or two topics can change a whole race in any level of government, right? But there are black men who have a hard time, even in the workforce, having to work for and report to a woman, let alone letting a woman now become president of the United States, which is why you haven't seen it happen. You can look at Florida, right? We've never had a woman governor in Florida, never had a woman speaker. We've had 3 women Senate president, never had a woman speaker, and we have our first one coming in the next 6 years. Never had a woman governor, right? We got close with Alex Sink, but there's a reason why that hasn't happened, and it's not always because of the whites. It's even some blacks who don't subscribe to that level of thinking. So I'm not buying to the conspiracy theory, but I do believe that there are people who really believe Trump is best. Let me also add that your wealthy elite, and not just by way of business, your wealthy entertainers, so on and so forth, they want Trump because Trump's presidency helped them out when it came to taxes, right? And so they look at that, and they look at how this whole thing plays out, and so it's very, very interesting to see how this all is going to play itself out. Project 2025, right, is being talked about, and what that ends up looking like if Trump gets into office. So there's a lot of things that's happening. Some of it is fear tactic on both ends. It look like. Let me also say on the show, I think is important. Somebody asked me this before about why do I think black men are having a hard time really buying into today's Democratic Party, and I would submit part of it is when it comes down to to sexual orientation. There are Black men who feel like the Democratic Party has walked away from them. And so they now found themselves as free agents and they found identity somewhere else. That's going to become a major play in November's election. And so it's things like that, Lisa. It could literally be a singular matter could arise that become the deciding factor in the election. I think that's important, right? If you remember in 4 years ago, the state of Georgia was a decider of the presidential election, right? Fulton County, right, was I would argue was the county that really made a big difference. Well, Georgia's made a lot of changes to their election laws. And so we got to think about those things as well. So there'll be a lot of factors that go into it. And then misinformation. I mean, Tyrese came out recently and went on this rant about things that if you research aren't 100% factual, but it's enough. Now, I would say jokingly but seriously, if Tyrese Gibson can sway you against who you're going to vote for, you're never going to vote for the person anyway, right? Like I've never felt like celebrities are the deciding factor on who's going to end up winning. But I would argue one or two topics could be a major player. And never forget, like I said on previous shows, what ultimately becomes important to the Republican base beyond just a Trump getting back in is the courts, right? You're looking at the next president in the next 4 years, whoever is president could end up appointing between 1 to 3 brand new Supreme Court justices in the next term. That's a major deciding factor to go to the polls. The courts matter big time to the Republican Party, right? Because you can get a lot of things done if you can change laws and have those laws enforced by the courts. So we've got to think about stuff like that.
Yeah. So what would you suggest? I know we do a lot, especially during this time, the big election.
Yeah.
But speak to what else is going on or at stake, so to speak, for this particular election. Like there are some Senate seats up and
Correct.
and House of Representatives seats up.
Yeah. So I always tell people that national politics irritate me, local politics affect me, right? We spend a lot of time and energy consuming national media and monitoring national elections. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but you should not do it to the detriment of what's going on locally in your community, what's going on in your state. And so in Florida, right, our gubernatorial election is done, what we call to be a midterm election, right? So the governor's race is not on the same ticket as a presidential election. Our governor's race won't be on until 2026. So on this one, you have U.S. Senator Rick Scott in Florida is up for re-election. He has a Democratic nominee, and the polls are showing it's competitive. I think Rick Scott wins that race. One reason I think he wins, but one thing I think he's a better candidate, but also I think it's because voters are lazy when it comes. I mean, it's easy for an incumbent to retain their seat. Voters sometimes, and here's the thing: I know top of the ticket matters down ballot, but I've seen it in races where people have voted for a Republican candidate or Democratic candidate, but going down their ballot, it was not consistent, right? So you have that U.S. Senate race that's up for consideration, and the winner of that race will get 6 years, right? So that's a big one. And then in Florida, every 2 years, so even including this year, the House of Representatives here, they run for re-election every 2 years, right? And so you have every Republican running for re-election in their House has a Democratic opponent, right? So you have that. And right now, Republicans have supermajority in the Florida House. And I think they will maintain supermajority. I think they may lose a few seats. I think they still maintain supermajority. On the Senate, on the Florida Senate side, there's a few races that are competitive. The main race everybody's looking at is the one here in Tallahassee between Corey Simon and Darryl Parks, right? Corey Simon is the incumbent. That race may spend, Lisa, between $7 to $13 million, which is unheard of in this area. That's how major this seat is, right? Democrats want to flip it back to being Democratic. Republicans want to maintain that, right? So that's a big race. That seat occupies 13 counties, right? So it occupies from Madison, really, maybe a little bit over. No, it goes to Taylor and all those things, all the way over from Madison, all the way over to, it's not Gulf, but like Lafayette and things of that nature. So it's a big county, encompasses a lot of individuals. So that's a lot that's going on that people need to be paying attention to, because that race, especially if you're in the Tallahassee Big Bend area, that race has impact on everyday living.
Mhm.
You look at our local race, right? We have
Mhm.
a one county city commission seat where the current incumbent Carter Richardson is up for re-election. It's her runoff between him and Dot Inman Johnson. In the primary, she had more votes than he did. Neither one of them had 50+1, so they have it's a runoff for November. She's garnering a lot of progressive votes, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. She's not a pushover candidate. She's been in that seat before. People really are behind her race.
Mhm.
That's a major thing right now. All of our city commission votes are usually 3-2, with Curtis being in the majority with the mayor and commissioner Diane Williams Cox. And so if Dot Inman Johnson wins, it goes from 3-2 this way, 3-2 the other way, right? So that race has become very, very important. Our superintendent race, Rocky Hanna's up for re-election. He won the primary. Now he's running against an independent who happens to be the current principal of Childs High School, right? Who's a black man, right?
Mm.
And who's a very well liked and respected principal, especially in the north side of town. So he's not going to be a pushover. That's a major race, and that race is going to be looked at with great interest, and we should probably expect a lot of people to turn out for that race. And so, top of the ticket with Trump and Harris will have an impact down ballot. What that looks like, I don't know, but it'll have a major impact. It's going to turn out people. So also remember now, Florida has two major amendments on the ballot, one for medical marijuana and one for abortion. That's going to also turn out voters.
Mm.
And so that's important too. You're going to have some young sleeping voters or sleeper voters, your young adults who are probably going to turn out because they have interest in medical marijuana being legalized or have interest in the abortion amendments, right? So there's a lot of factors that play into these races that are people need to be studied up on their ballots and asking questions and really educating themselves before they go into that ballot box. But as you said, Lisa, people can wave signs on the corner. They could talk
Yeah.
highly about a candidate. When they get in
Yeah.
that box, you don't know who they're voting for.
You don't. We
You have
don't.
no idea who they're voting for. You got to be
We
mindful
don't.
of those things. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot at stake in November. A lot at stake in November.
Yeah. Just I, you know, I know we have to talk about this stuff, but I tell you,
Yeah.
it was like, oh,
Yeah.
I guess the other thing too with the presidential election, I'm hopeful
Yeah.
for the candidate that I want, which is not Trump, but I am hopeful. I but I also know, like you just said, our local, so
Hmm.
even if you're not in Florida and you're watching, please, 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 research, talk to
Correct.
people,
Correct.
find out what's
Correct.
going on.
All that.
Don't skip voting, or
All
don't
that.
just go in and say, okay, check president, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it is very, very important that
Yeah.
um we are in touch, that we're
Yeah.
vigilant
Yep.
about the people who make the laws.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm still working on the part about holding them accountable,
Yeah.
and how we can do a better job at that, because I still am not confident that these people have our best interests at heart.
I will tell you, I just got asked this question, Lisa, 2 days ago in a conversation I had with someone. And they were asking me my opinion on, what am I hearing out there from everyday citizens relates to local politics? Because if you look at the turnout in Leon County, for example, in the primary, it wasn't the lowest turnout, but it was a very low turnout. People are just disinterested.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was sharing with the person in response is some of that is because people have no confidence in elected officials. They love their commissioner, they hate the commission. They love their representative, they hate the legislature. They love their congressman, they hate Congress, right? Kind of how it all plays out. But you got to think about it also. If you are a single mother or single father, if you are a grandmother raising your grandchildren, you're listening for to talk about things that matter to you, affordable
Mm-hmm.
housing, the economy, right? Things of that nature. They don't want to hear you bickering about stuff that has nothing to do with their everyday living. And that's what's happening. So what's happening
Mm-hmm.
is, Lisa, you're actually in a crowded room of like-minded people. There are
Mm-hmm.
way more Lisa Larays out there than you may realize. People who just they're burnt, they're exhausted by the conversation, they have no interest in the conversation, turned off by the conversation. Some of that's because the elected officials have forced you into that mindset because they don't connect with you, right? And so I was telling this person, we got to get back to a point where we create forums for everyday citizens to be able to come in and have their voices heard. And you may invite an elected official to come in, but it's not about them, it's about the constituency. Because what's
Mm-hmm.
happening is we're letting the elected officials dominate the conversation, and
Mm.
they may at times hit on something important to us, but we're not holding them accountable to actually vote for and implement what's important to us. And so 4 years later, you hear from them again, but they really can't tell you what they did for the last 4 years in that regard. But now what you're seeing is so much bickering on. Like, I never thought I would see fighting amongst the Leon County property appraiser race, but that became a back and forth. Like, it's things where people are trying to survive, and affordable housing is so challenging in our state and in our country that
Mm-hmm.
people are struggling to make ends meet to even afford their rent or their mortgage. They don't
Yeah.
have time to really care about you fighting over, somebody cutting you off in a debate. They want to know, what are you going to do so I can
Yeah.
keep my roof over my house? And so,
Yeah.
because you're talking about that, they've completely lost any confidence. And I told them, when I call, when people lose hope, they no longer dream for better. That was
Mm.
the one thing about Barack Obama's campaign in 2008 was he pushed on the word of hope and change, right?
Mm-hmm.
People bought into that narrative. And
Yeah.
now it's like people are more afraid of what's going to happen based on who wins. They have no confidence that anybody cares about their livelihood and their betterment. And you look at our young voters, right? They're completely turned. This current generation is probably the most um um they don't fear God, they don't have a knowledge of the church, and they have no interest in politics in the majority. Those three things have been proven through polling, right? But that they inherited that from the previous generation. They kind of just fully throw themselves in there. And so people are running for reelection and they can't tell you what they did for the last 4 years. We got to be concerned about that and start asking ourselves. And go back to the Harris thing real quick before we end in the show. That's the other thing I'll say that Harris is going to have to really be able to convince people in the debate is, like or hate Donald Trump. He did 4 years as president, so he has 4 years he can point to, good and or bad, that he was able to
Mm-hmm.
do while being president. She's saying, if I become president, I'll do these things. So to some people, she's more of a risk than he is,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But she has to now convince the people that you can trust me. I know what I'm doing. Day one, I'm going to show you what I can do. And I think that's important for people to understand. No president does it by themselves. They put together a cabinet, so on and so forth. But Trump is running on his platform and his decisions for 4 years of being president, and good and or bad, right? He's running as a former president,
Mm-hmm.
and so there are people who believe he can do something for you. But we as a people need to educate ourselves on our ballots, but also for those in and outside of our state of Florida, know what your state's election laws are, because some of those states have made changes and it
Mm-hmm.
could impact you when you show up to do early voting or you show up at the ballot. It may change, things may have changed, you not be aware of it. So you want to make sure that you have done everything right to be qualified to
Absolutely.
vote.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. That was gonna be my next thing. Just make sure that you are looking at that. Make sure you are registered. Your registration is clear.
all that.
All of that, so you won't, have those problems
Correct.
come election time. It is definitely uh, a conversation that needs to be had with everybody, like in
Everybody,
your house, like
everybody,
we
everybody.
gotta keep talking about it. So I will have this one piece of advice for people running for office. Would y'all please stop doing these campaigns about what somebody didn't do and they didn't do this and they this and they did. Tell me what you gonna do. I think you just said that, but I'm so sick of these commercials like bashing We intelligent. We are so intelligent. Let me know what you gonna do. I don't think you running for me. I think you just running so you could say what a wrong person this is.
Mhm.
Tell me why you right.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me why you right for me.
Good point.
And then be right for me. I just don't trust y'all.
Yeah.
And then some of you, well, I ain't gonna say that with questionable character and y'all. Well, I ain't gonna say that, but
Mm-hmm.
I guess when you can have somebody that is a felon, been convicted of all kind of felonies, and they still running for president, I guess anybody can run for anything.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
But there are people who believe that all that Trump's going through in the courts is a propaganda of the Democrats, right? So it's that's where we are in our world now, where you know, yeah, yeah. Let's remember also, America has enemies amongst other countries that watch everything we do and try to
Yep.
figure out a way to find us being vulnerable.
Yep.
And we put everything on our news media so our enemies don't have to go far to be in tune to what's going on
Yep.
and intrude in that regard. And so we have to be mindful of the power behind our vote, and that you
Yep.
don't, your lack of trust of them, Lisa, should be your motivation, right?
And yeah,
Your
yeah,
motivation.
yeah. And it definitely is. Like I say, y'all know I may not like it, but I do my duty
Yeah.
and I'm learning to do my due diligence as well. I am gonna vote. You will not stop me from voting.
Yeah.
Uh
Yeah.
so rain, sleet, shine, whatever it is, I'm gonna get out and do what I'm supposed to do. But I'm looking forward to the day when, and just like I say about my church, when I have leadership that is trying just as hard as I am
Yeah.
to do the right thing, to be right,
Yeah.
to treat people right.
Correct.
So those are the kind of things that that I am looking for. Good character.
Yeah.
And I always say I try to live my life in such a way that if somebody lie on me, won't nobody believe it.
Yeah. Correct.
So that's what I'm looking for in my government leadership as well. So
That makes sense.
yeah, so that's what I'm looking for. Listen, Darrick D. McGhee Sr.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for joining us here
Absolutely.
at Kitchen Talk. I'm not sure where my co-hosts are tonight. But
It's our time.
They've
It's our
been
time.
leaving us to our own devices for the
It's
last
our
few
show.
times.
It's our show.
We hold it down though. We hold it down. We did fine.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us tonight here at Kitchen Talk, CTC Conversations That Cook. Listen, if you are watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications so you will never miss another show. Always great conversations in the kitchen. If you are watching us on Facebook, again, hit the like button, turn on your notifications so you won't miss us when we're back here next week at 9 o'clock. Next Thursday, 9 o'clock, we'll be right back here in the kitchen. So thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to bid you a very good night. Good night. Thank you again.
Everyone. Absolutely.
Good night, good night, good night, good night, good night.
Let's talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk, let's talk. Conversations that cook. Kitchen talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk, let's talk. Conversations that cook. Let's talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk, let's talk.